I read his post several different times, and when our producer, Chris Healy, called me and asked about it, I had not heard about it at the time. And he told me to take a look at it, Skip. And I did. I think for me, I don't have a problem with athletes speaking up. But I want to make sure before they speak up, they read up. I came from a very difficult background also. I think a lot of people know my story. My grandmother raised her 9 kids and raised my mom's 3. And I thought a lot of the same lines earlier in my career as Dez is thinking. I made it out, why can't you? And then one day while sitting alone, I started thinking, what about the person that didn't have Mary Porter as a grandmother? What about the person that didn't have grandparents that says, okay, my grandkids' parents are getting a divorce, I'm going to Chicago and I'm going to bring them to me and put them in a situation so they can thrive. Skip, I think Dez's heart was in a good place, but because he hasn't read up enough on the race relationship and the history of racism in America, it came out totally wrong. Let me take it piece by piece if I can, Skip. First of all, he said he saw a person quote Charles Barkley. I'm going to say this. I have the utmost respect for Charles Barkley. He was a heck of a ball player. When it comes to basketball, please quote Charles Barkley. But when it comes to race in America, please don't quote Charles Barkley. Because what is happening is that, Dez, when you say personal accountability, okay, who do I hold account? So I'm supposed to hold me accountable for slavery? What about Reconstruction? What about the Jim Crow South? What about segregation? What about the violation of my civil rights and my voting rights? So who do I hold accountable for that? He also said that instead of making videos of the history of racism, we're one of the few race of people that everybody says you need to get over your past. Slavery happened 400 years. You weren't in slavery. Your parents wasn't in slavery. I have yet to hear a person tell a Jewish person, you weren't in the Holocaust. Get over it. They still do movies about the Holocaust. They still write books. No one tells them to stop. But because Dez does not understand the systemic, let me take it here. It's documented that they say the first African-American slaves arrived in the U.S. in 1619. It's 2017, so in 2 years, it'll be 400 years the first slave arrived in America. So for 400 years, there's been systemic, institutionalized racism, bias, perpetuated and perpetrated against a race of people. And Dez says, you need to be accountable. Dez, I can't get ahead if someone is constantly keeping me behind. Dez, we're not in position. We don't own TV stations. We don't own radio stations. For the most part, we're not CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. So we can't shift the dynamic of the hiring and firing practice that can lift the race of people up. Do you understand what has transpired? And people thought because we had a 2-term black president, President Obama, that 400 years of racism would be eradicated in 8 years. Think about how long it took us to get to this point. And then he mentioned some iconic figures, Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X. Do you actually think they did what they did for themselves? Is that what you think? You think Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat? This was because of her? She knew the ramifications. You think Dr. King lost his life just for himself? Malcolm X lost his life only for himself? There's an incident that happened in 2011. He was issued a citation. He was at a mall with some of his friends. The police intervened and asked him to pull his pants up. So think about this, Dez. How long has that been in effect? Where the police tell you to pull your pants up. They're profiling you because they think that's the kind of criminal behavior. Mm-hmm. They didn't look at you as a Dallas Cowboy. They looked at you as any other black young man in America. That's what you don't get, Dez. So when you say personal accountability, all you do is that you feed a certain segment of the population to say, see, I told you. Dez Bryant said it. Charles Barkley said it. Dez, you're not even the 2%. You're the 0.01% of Black Americans that makes millions. But there's so many that don't. Dez, do you realize that you're still Black? They still view you as Black, even though you catch touchdown for the Dallas Cowboys? Do you realize that? You think they view you differently? They applaud what you do, Dez. They don't applaud who you are. I commend you for changing, coming from where you came from, your story, his story. I know a little bit about his story. If you get a chance, you can read it. I commend him, Skip. But he is so wrong. He's so absolutely and horrifically wrong in this situation. I hate when they ask us to accept responsibility for slavery, accept responsibility for the 400 years of institutional and systemic racism. The voting rights, there's some places now still that you're infringing on people's voting right. And I'm gonna say this, Skip, and I'm gonna let it go. Skip, you remember this, in the late 80s, there was a crack cocaine epidemic that was wiping through America. New York, Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta, LA. What did they do, Skip? They didn't say these people needed treatment. They gave you mandatory minimums. They made the sentences even tougher. They came up with the 3 strikes rule. Now there's something going on called the opiate addiction that's sweeping through the Rust Belt. That's affecting white America. And what do they say? Jail is not the answer for these people. They need treatment. You see how they did it for them and how they do it for us. So Dez, next time you speak up, make sure you read up and understand what we're actually up against. I'm not saying you should have any ill will to everybody that's treated you wrong. I judge a man by how a man treats me, not his race, by that man. And I commend you because you say you've been profiled, but you don't have ill will only against those that profiled you. But Dez, you're wrong in this instance. And you do a disservice to a lot of African Americans in this country when you say we need to take more accountability when we're not in position to do a whole lot because of what's been placed upon us for the last 400 years.
I hear everything you just said, and as I always tell you, when it comes to the point is I defer to you when it comes to a Black man's view of another Black man's view of race relations in America. So I'm completely deferring to you. I can only give you the white guy's view of this, and it's tinged with the fact that obviously I grew up a Dallas Cowboy fan. So I've been rooting for Dez to grow up, to mature, and if nothing else, this showed me a little bit of maturity on his part because he tried.
Yes.
But I think he tried to also disqualify himself. He starts out by saying, I do a great job of minding my own business, and he ends up by saying, not that my opinion matters, but I just wanted to share my thoughts on this. So he's trying to have a little social conscience here for the first time.
Right.
I mean, the Dez I know, I'd be afraid he'd post top 10 places to party in Dallas, Texas. You know, that's that guy. And I'm happy that he at least did a little soul searching here, even if in your view, as an older, more accomplished player, obviously, you're saying you don't get it.
No.
And it well be that he doesn't get it, but he's at least trying. And I appreciated the fact that he just plunged out there and said, I'm just going to share my heart here. And his heart is telling him that I'm trying to do my little part here to be accountable as we go forward. So to your point that offended you, he's saying, instead of making videos about the history of racism, we should focus on individual accountability. So he's just trying to say, I'm going to try to do my little part here to make it better going forward because we know how bad it was and how bad it still is in many ways. Yes, we get that. I even think he gets that. But he's trying to say, how can we make this better? Well, you're saying it's hard to make it better because it is what it is, right? That's kind of your...
It's hard to make it better because if you don't remember your past,
Yeah,
you're destined to repeat it.
I got it.
And the thing is for Dez is that Dez is looking at it like, I'm good. I make 15 million, I make 14 million a year, so I'm untouchable. But Dez, you're not. You know, Dr. King said the ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by bad people, but the silence of that by the
Yep.
good people.
It's a great quote.
Skip, if all you do is think about, okay, well, it didn't happen to me, personal accountability. Well, the police ain't whipping my butt, oh, I'm good. Well, I get the right to vote, I'm good. I got a job, I'm good. That's personal accountability. What type of person would think that's okay in this society because I'm good, everything's okay? The LBGT community, they don't think because Ellen has a talk show that the LBGT community is great. Women, we've had to fight for so long, and we're constantly having to fight. They're still putting barriers in place that makes it harder for us to vote. They make it harder for us to get, for the longest time, Skip, we've been the most unemployed, the most uneducated, the most lacked health care. We're a small minority, a small percentage of the population, but we make up a vast percentage of those without health care. We make up a vast percentage of those that's unemployed, that's uninsured.
Okay, I got it. And I hear you and I respect it and I hurt for you as you hurt in public. And I hope Des is watching this. He does watch our show, so I hope he takes to heart what you're saying. But I've always said about professional athletes, especially star athletes, they often make the worst role models because they just have lost all perspective on everything.
Yes.
Because there's so many temptations, as you well know, and in the bigger picture, it's just they've been coddled and spoiled at every level since Pee Wee football,
Yes.
right? And I think Des has climbed that ladder, so
Right.
to speak. And in the end, is he our friend Michael Eric Dyson? You know, does he have the credentials to speak on race relations? That Michael is a professor at Georgetown and an esteemed author and a speaker.
Theologian,
no,
yes.
He's a theologian. You know, yeah, he's a minister.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he doesn't. But in the end, again, maybe I'm out of line to even say this, but I just appreciated that he tried a little bit. Maybe it's wrong-headed, maybe it's naive, maybe it's uneducated in race relations, as you
Yes.
talk about racial history. But hey, this was a new Des to me. I'll give him that much.
The race dynamic is very interesting
Yeah.
because people don't want to talk about it because it has so much, there's so much seeded. Because think about it, Skip, when you talk about race, you're talking about, you want to talk to the people, because I want to have this conversation with the people that's inflicted the most harm over the 400-year history. I mean, the lion is not going to the table with the gazelle and the gazelle say, well, look, you've been chasing me and killing me for all these years. What do you want to talk about? I'm telling you what's hurting me. I'm telling you what's hurt me. And then you tell me it's my fault. Why don't you accept some accountability? Accept some accountability for slavery? Accept some accountability for segregation? Really? Man.
Well, everything in life is about balance. So you can have personal accountability while also still having compassion and empathy for people that have not been able to have the success that you've had. And that's really the bottom line of it.
When I go home, I hang with a lot of the guys that are not as well off as Shannon Sharpe is. And I talk to them and I see, Skip, I have a sense. This is why I'm so compassionate, because I know what it's like. I wasn't always this Shannon Sharpe. I wasn't that guy. I know what it's like to not have running water. I know what it's like to not have lights. So I'm very compassionate. I didn't lose that sense because I got money like, oh, I'm good now. No, we can't think like that. Because I tell you, the one thing, whether you like it or not, the Jewish community, they will take care of their own. They will. And we get guys like Dez, and I think his heart was in the right place, Skip. But it came out totally wrong because he's uninformed.